Conversation with Ron MacLean.
Welcome to our Friday edition of In Conversation. On the show today, Nick Nurse of the Toronto Raptors, Sheldon Keefe of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Really nice to have a coaching clinic. You know, in the case of Nick Nurse, he won his first championship as a coach in 1996 in the British Basketball League in Birmingham, won again in 2000, this time in Manchester, and then he came back to the United States and in 2007 took over a team in the NBA's developmental league, known at the time as the D League. Now it's called the G League. The Energy was a team in Iowa, and they were a sensation. They were, with attendance records, doing really well. They won divisional crowns in 2009 and 10, and then they won the actual league championship in 2011. Then he won another in 2013 with a different organization, and that's when the Toronto Raptors came calling. First as assistant to Dwayne Casey, and then, of course, as head coach, where he won the championship last spring. So he won it as a rookie head coach in the NBA, but he actually had 1,000 miles, thousands of players, thousands of victories, all before winning the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Nick Nurse. In the case of Sheldon Keefe, it's also just a string of hits. He took over as coach in Pembroke in Junior A hockey in the Ottawa Valley in 2006, and his Lumber Kings were also a sensation. They won 5 straight divisional league championships, and then he won the National RBC Cup in 2011. From there up to Sault Ste. Marie, where he won a ton. He was the CHL and OHL Coach of the Year, and that got him the job with the Toronto Marlies in the AHL. And in 2018, he won the Calder Cup. Nothing but winning, musical winning for these two. They are like conductors, where each performer plays their part, with maybe the exception of one. What would either of them know about second fiddle?
From the defending champion Toronto Raptors, Nick Nurse.
Nick Nurse, he's for real.
Nick Nurse has been awesome. And arguably this year is even more impressive.
You know, I also coach the Canadian national team as well. I coached in the backwaters my whole life, and now I got 2 of the best jobs in the world at the same time. So it's pretty cool, fun for me.
We're going to start off exactly where we finish off, with our emotion and our energy and our passion level through the roof.
The Pembroke Lumber Kings have beat the odds. They win their first national title. The Marlies are Calder Cup champions.
He's always pushing himself to try to get better, but it's not a selfish push. It's a push to try to improve the whole group.
There they are, Sheldon Keefe and Nick Nurse, and we have some breaking news. Let's start with Novice Rangers. The A-team in Oakville has a heck of a young hockey player who I understand is his birthday today. So first to you, Sheldon, who's that and what's happening?
Yeah, my son Wyatt celebrating his 8th birthday here today, and we're trying to be creative and make it as unique and memorable as possible.
It's funny with isolation, right? I'm talking a lot to kids who are having birthdays and they're kind of sad, no friends. Well, he's great. And so is Landon, your older son. I just love them both. So he's a good little hockey player. I've presented him with prizes. And the other news of the day, obviously, Nick, is that the Ontario government's opening up facilities. Maybe you can run us through exactly what's happening.
Yeah, we're going to Monday, going to go back to the OVO, in line with some other businesses that are opening on Monday too. We're just really following the Toronto and Ontario lead as far as being able to do it. But it's real minimal. It's one player and one coach. They enter, and then when they leave, the whole place gets a cleaning, and then another player and another coach come in. So it's pretty minimal contact. They'll be cleaning. The coaches will be wearing gloves and masks. Really heavy protocol here. But I think what we're trying to do is give our players a safe environment, the safest environment, and, rather than having them try to go somewhere else and do something and get them back to just getting on the floor and moving around like they're used to moving around just a little bit.
That's good. And Sheldon, I know it's kind of just breaking for you as well, but what do you know as of the moment?
Well, I think, I am still kind of getting educated in terms of how it impacts us. The expectation right now is that we will gain some access to our facility as well over at the Fort Performance Center. But the NHL is in a different position. I think it'll just be those players that have been continuing their rehab, anyone recovering from injuries that will be accessing that. But a lot of those same protocols that Nick's talking about are and have been in place and will continue to be for those in those circumstances.
Nick, we know about your music, but also you're working on your dissertation for your PhD in philosophy, and you almost need to be a philosopher to know how to answer the questions about these conflicting agendas, keeping everyone safe and reopening North America. So I would love to know are you hopeful for a return for the NBA? And do you think it's important, or what's your position?
Well, I really think it is a philosophical question, right? Obviously, the safety of everyone involved and a very, very tolerable risk is at the utmost, right? I think that is always got to be at the forefront of our thoughts, but I think there is a school of theory that says, man, what a boost it would give to people if we could figure out a way to play these games in safety and real low risk. How great that would be for just, not North America, globally, everybody to be able to switch on and watch some sports and kind of boost everyone's spirit. So I think it's a tough one, obviously. And I think there's still a lot of questions to be answered and some time to pass yet.
What's your sense of it all, Sheldon?
Well, I think very similar, of course, to what Nick is saying. The safety of everybody involved is going to be paramount, and it's our job as coaches and as players to be as prepared as possible if or when they give us that green light that we can get back to entertaining people. And that's our focus in controlling what we can. But of course, knowing that there's a lot of other things happening that are more important. And, when it's our turn, then we'll be ready to go.
All right, that's the heavy stuff, and I really appreciate that. Nick, it's such a thrill to talk to you for a lot of reasons, but I'll go into The Last Dance first, because your story, I saw an interview you did with Roz Golden-Woode that was amazing about how you studied the Bulls in the 90s and how you actually spent time in Montana with Phil Jackson. So tell the viewer about your relationship to Phil and the Bulls.
Yeah, well, it's been great to have The Last Dance on. I feel like I'm reliving my life in the 90s again, because it just made sense as a young coach. I was over in England. This was kind of pre-internet days and all this stuff, so I was kind of studying my craft, and I was able to find a company that would send me VHS tapes. If anybody out there remembers what those are, right? We certainly do. But yeah. And I ordered the Bulls games. They were the team to watch. Obviously, everybody that's watching The Last Dance sees how fascinating they are, along with how great they are. And obviously I learned a lot. I was watching all those games probably 10 or 20 times. There was nothing else really for me to do. So I did learn a lot. I always say that Phil Jackson was my mentor, but he didn't know it. So I was really studying him, substitutions, after timeout plays, timeouts, just demeanor and command of the team, and all those things I was studying. Along with, I was running his offense, the triangle offense as well. And that was great education for me too. And like you mentioned, I was fortunate enough to go out and see him this past summer, right after I got the Raptors head coaching job. Alex McKechnie, our director of sports science, had worked for Phil Jackson for 5 years with the Lakers. And I think it was the day I got the job, he came over and said, "Hey, you want me to hook you up with Phil?" And I said, "Yeah." And Phil said, "Hey, come on out." So I went out there for 3 days.
And what do you remember about that?
Well, it was fascinating. I mean, first of all, it was you can imagine I'm just a small town kid from a small town in Iowa, right? And this guy's really, I looked up to him incredibly, for much of my career. And I'm sitting there driving around in a truck with him through around the lake, and he's giving me a historical perspective of the area. And we went to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Spent about 10 or 12 hours a day. The conversations were amazing. He's a very smart guy, and he's got a real spiritual presence about him. I'd ask him a question and I may not get the answer for about an hour, because he wanted to kind of lay all the groundwork around, why he was going to answer what he did. And the rhythm of the conversation is what I found fascinating.
I'll come back to that, because I want Sheldon in on it. Thelonious Monk, one of your idols on the musical side, that's how he talks. He would always sort of revisit it 4 or 5 times to arrive at the masterpiece. Sheldon, for you, Brian Murray, and you both connect on Joe Madden. I was curious when before we started, you mentioned Joe Madden, Nick. Certainly you've studied Joe Madden over on your side, Sheldon, but Brian Murray was a nice opportunity for you in your young career in the Ottawa Valley, right? To go and meet with somebody that gave you the time.
Yeah, he certainly was. We had a connection to the Ottawa Valley. I was coaching the Pembroke Lumber Kings at the junior A level at the time, and Brian, of course, growing up in Shawville and coaching the Lumber Kings on his path to becoming an NHL coach, we had that connection. But I was able to have the opportunity to talk to him first of all and reach out, and then he was gracious enough to have me in his office, and I went in there fully expecting 10 or 15 minutes of his time. It was in the off season, and actually at that time he was undergoing a coaching search, and he was a busy guy trying to find a head coach at the time himself, and I ended up spending 2 hours in there, and just the stories and how much of an open book that he was to share. In fact, part of the reason I was there was just to try to get some advice on how to take a step and how to be prepared for a coaching interview and all those things. So he went as far as walking me through the questions that he was asking to different candidates at the time, and what to expect, and talking about all the different stories of his path as a coach and all the different things that he went through. He was a terrific resource for me, tremendous gentleman. And of course, when he passed, it was heartbreaking, and I was grateful I was able to be at the service and be around those that he connected with, because he certainly was one that reached out to many, many people.
The late, great Brian Murray. What a story that is. Nick, so this idea, if I think I understand Phil Jackson, I've got my sacred hoops I was showing you here, and I've got 11 rings and all this stuff about Phil. He said, look, it's all well and good to study the other, but it has to come from inside. We need Nick Nurse here. We don't need Joe Madden. We don't need Phil Jackson. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, I don't think, I'm just trying to get some ideas, right? And I'm trying to study some greatness. I think there's some greatness in these guys, and I don't think you can become those guys. There's no way you can. I think you're naturally gonna be who you are, and I think that is a key. You get, I think everybody always says that, oh, you got to be yourself, and that's right, But I do find there's all kinds of things, like for instance with Joe Madden, he has a meeting with the team the night before training camp, spring training starts. And I was very interested in just how he executed that. And he gave me like all the nitty gritty details, the logistics, and I was able to glean a lot for that. And I, kind of did the same thing. I mean, not exactly, but it gave me the setup and the mindset and the whole thing. And, just little things like that you can kind of tack into your own philosophies and vision, for the team. And those are always helpful.
Yeah, I can't imagine sitting in the mirror and thinking I got this without some wisdom coming from somebody else. But go back to that, because I know when you met with Kawhi, Wayne Gretzky certainly as a captain did everything one-on-one. What's your methodology? Do you do much team get-togethers, or do you try to do everything mano-a-mano?
Oh, I think you got to do both. I think that for sure there's times when you want to bring the guy in, talk to him one-on-one, and that goes on quite a bit. I would say one of my favorite things to do is go out on the practice floor just before practice starts, as guys are, they're working with their coaches and moving around, and then call them over for a 2 or 3 minute chat, one-on-one on the court. I find that a great environment to make some little key connections and adjustments and things like that. But then I also believe, strongly sometimes maybe a particular person needs to hear something in front of the team so that his team understands the message that they're all in on this too. So I think you got to do a little bit of everything.
John Tortorella tells a great story of Vinny Lecavalier, was a star player for him in Tampa, and he would call him into the office, and Lecavalier felt threatened. He would prefer to be called out in front of the team so that the team had his back, Lecavalier's. Very interesting dynamic. So Sheldon, your relationship, first of all, to player personnel, and then I want to get into what it must be your triangle offense. You've got something going on that keeps you winning, but player personnel first. How do you do relationships?
Well, I think a lot of what Nick's saying there is really important. I think you've got to be able to adapt to what the situation calls for, what each personality calls for, and continue to grow those relationships and check in with different guys. So sometimes it's talking about something that's relevant to what's happening in the season. Sometimes it's just to continue to have that connection and make sure that the player knows that you're caring about them. You haven't forgot about them in any particular time, and continue to grow that. And actually that's been one of the real benefits that we've been trying to take advantage of with this extra time that we have here now. Obviously, with me being a coach that came in mid-season, and I was still working on developing those relationships and having a lot of conversations with guys during this pause has helped me in that regard. But I think you just have to be able to adapt. There absolutely is a time and a place where you want to talk openly in front of the group, and it can have benefits, beyond that one particular player in that case. But certainly, I think anytime you can connect with a player one-on-one, that's really where the gold is at for me, and you try to do that as much as possible.
And incidentally, both of you, the floor's open. So if either wants to butt in on that, but the triangle offense, we know what the Bulls did and Tex Winter and what you did, Nick. Do you have something like that, Sheldon? Is there a secret to the fact you've never missed the playoffs and you've won everything in sight?
Well, I mean, I think there are certainly principles within that triangle offense that transfer. I think there's a lot of correlation in the two sports. Obviously, both are 5-on-5, and when you take the offensive and defensive zones, very similar, to the play that happens in basketball, and supporting your teammates and movement and all those types of things. I think there's some correlation there. We watch quite a bit of basketball and try to learn from those different things. So certainly the triangulation is something that has been in hockey as a term, even when I was coming up as a young player, that was talked about. And I think those Bulls teams, and the effect of triangle offense had, I think it moved on to multiple sports, and hockey, I think, is certainly one of them. So having that level of support and be able to make multiple plays in different directions and have different options certainly is a big part of everything that we do. But I don't think we're unique in that in hockey.
No, but it's interesting because it's selfless. In the NBA, you can kind of run your star the bulk of the game, but you've got like 4 or 5 offensive stars on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Nick, you can add to that, and I would frame it also with the idea of like when Horace Grant, Jordan didn't trust him, right, to run the triangle, and then he does find John Paxson, and boom, the rest is history. I would just love to know, do you still use elements of it, and why was it such a breakthrough?
Yeah, I think that the basis of it was is that, just as you alluded to, it does let you still get your star player or your most effective scorer or whatever opportunities to get the ball in areas they don't get double teamed very easily or very quickly. So that's important, especially in basketball. But it also is an offense where everybody touches the ball. So it's more fun for the other guys to play rather than just go stand clear away and give the star the ball and let him shoot every time, and maybe you go try to get a rebound. Well, now you're involved, you're handling, you're making passes, you're making decisions, et cetera. And I just think that makes players better. They'll do other parts of the game better. I think, and it's just a unique thing. Now, currently, I don't run the triangle offense. We run some certain sets and actions that are very similar, but the spacing is what we do. And I kind of broke it up. It's more almost of a square type thing that we do now than a triangle. But again, we were just trying to use more space, more of the floor. And I always say that for us, offense is about creating space, and defense is about taking that space away. It's really like the primary thing we focus on both ends of the floor.
I'd be curious about Game 6 in Golden State. So early on, Lowry hits from 3-point range, and that looks good. Everything seemed to come from the perimeter for the first part of the game, and then in the second, everything's under the rim. And then it's, of course, Van Vliet who's got the magic. Him and Klay Thompson. How key was that Danny Green colliding with Klay Thompson defending the goal?
Well, I mean, I think there was a lot of key moments, obviously, as far as which affected the players that were on the floor. Some people would say it was the only reason we won, right? I think there would be a lot of people, but I just think that they could only have one guy shoot the ball each time down the floor. They have a lot of weapons. We played them at full strength a couple times during the year as well. I think we were really destined to win that thing last year, and I think we'll get onto that later. But I think that ball bouncing in, that shot that Kawhi hit bouncing on the rim 4 times and going in, it was like when that went in, I was like, we're going to win this whole thing. I think we're the team of destiny here, and I think that might be the case.
Well, I'll let you go on one more thing on that, because I watched your body language as you sat down post game 5, And I thought, oh my God, Nick's great with the media. How in the world is he going to pull this one off? And I would just love to know what you were saying to yourself about the posturing, the positioning, to have that confidence in your team bound for California for Game 6.
Yeah, I think, you got to kind of go, well, here's how I went through it. I first of all, I was having a blast. Right. It was such a thrill to be coaching in the NBA finals. And that's kind of how I approached it. I was like, man, I get to do this again. Right. This is like I'm going to go here. I understand, we kind of had one and had a chance to wrap it up and we didn't. But I tell you what, I got on that plane and I could just tell the body language and the verbiage and the communication that I was seeing from the players that they were just fine. They were just fine, and I thought, man, that gave me a lot of confidence. And it wasn't phony or BS or anything. It was they were just like, okay, we're gonna go out here and we're gonna get this done. And you could kind of sense that all the way through. And I kind of took that road. I'm gonna enjoy this again. We get another amazing chance to play in the NBA Finals. I get a chance to coach in it. Let's go for it.
Sheldon, you can pick up on that if you wish, but for me, your post-game presser that I found a real intriguing one was after the Carolina game where David Ayers comes in and wins the game. And I thought, oh my God. I mean, if the Toronto Maple Leafs lose a playoff position because of the Zamboni driver at the Marlies rink, that had to be, and you were so gracious. You were so nice to David in that, that I thought I would go through a wall for that guy. It couldn't have been easy. Take me through the mental feeling you had that night when Carolina whipped you 6-2.
Well, I think before I go there, I'll comment a little bit on Nick and his demeanor. I think as a coach, for me, I really enjoy watching coaches speak and how they answer questions and how they deal with different things. And I do it regularly in hockey, of course, but even in other sports, especially big moments are happening, is you want to be able to see how is the coach handling this situation. And I do remember that presser, Nick, just how calm and confident that he was, and really setting his team up to just remain confident and get out and enjoy the opportunity to go play again and get it done. And obviously that's what happened. So I take a lot from that. But in our case, I just think that anytime things go bad or not the way you want or expect them to, everybody's looking to you to then set the tone for what's going to happen next. And when you step up to the microphone, that's my first opportunity to kind of set the tone in the media, to have the players back, show that I've got confidence in them, because I certainly do. And one night's not going to make or break our team, and we need to press on and be prepared for the next day. And that really, as I say, is my first opportunity to speak in that particular game. I didn't talk to the team after the game. So that's, I'm talking to our fans, I'm talking to the media, but I'm also talking to the players. So all of that comes into play. And it's really a really important moment as a coach. You got to get that right.
I remember what you said is, we were lousy on special teams, and our talented guys, it's the first time since I've been here where they couldn't make a pass, but you protected them with that. It's the only time you've ever seen it, and that was beautiful. I thought you did a great job of that. Okay, a couple of things. Your dissertation, Nick, what's it going to be about?
Well, I'm doing a study on NBA players, philanthropy and charitable foundations. I'm just trying to dive into them and see kind of where some of them went wrong and where some of them have gone very well, and just try to get a little more research and information out there. I figured, I've started my own foundation here. Ironically, the night kicked it off the night the NBA shut down, March 11th. But all the players are, I think it's important that they give back to their local communities where they're playing, and also their communities where they're from. And I just wanted to dig into that a little bit and study that.
Your generosity, Chantel Valet, coaches the Hamilton Honey Badgers. You gave her time, and she was impressed with the 4 takeaways she got from you: was player personnel, simple offense, simple defense, and plan your last timeout, your game-winning end-of-game play. Which one would you like to say is the biggest of the 4?
Well, the player personnel one's, really important, right? You got to have some good players and try to improve them and give them great opportunities to succeed. And make sure you got the right ones on the floor. I think we call a timeout, and we spend the first minute talking about who should be in, who should be out, what do our matchups look like, and it's really important.
Sheldon, you obviously ran Pembroke and the Sioux with Kyle Dubas, and the Marlies. So you've built teams. You've done everything from sell the popcorn and programs to coach. Does that help you know who's got it on the given game?
I think certainly all the experiences, as I go through it, I think in hockey circles and certainly in the NHL, I'm regarded as a young coach. But, for me, this is my 16th year as a head coach at various levels. And I think as much as it's not in the NHL, every one of those experiences matter. And every one of those experiences make up who you are. So certainly, I think, you kind of have something you can relate to along the way. For me, it's just remaining grounded and recognizing, I went from being a player, a professional player, and then having to go back to started, low-level junior A hockey. And at a time, as you mentioned, where my wife and I were taking on a big task of running an organization ourselves, and we're running the concession stands and selling hot chocolate and coffee and popcorn. And I'm cutting video while working the cash register and getting ready for that next day's practice or whatever. You start in there and you learn about the game. You learn what works for you. You learn about people. You learn about community. You learn about winning. You learn about losing and dealing with all those different things. And no matter where you're at or what you're doing, all those things, contribute to who you become. And certainly, my path has been one I've been very fortunate to lead me where I am, but also know that I've had a lot of lessons along the way that have helped me prepare.
Both of you. It's amazing. So it's Mother's Day on Sunday. Nick, you first. You can talk about the mother of your children. You can talk about your mom must have been quite a lady. So I'd love to hear about your version of Mom's Day.
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 9. So my mom was amazing. My mother actually passed away during last season, early on in the season. So she got to see me get to be a head coach. She watched every game on either the computer or the TV. And I always say when that ball was bouncing on the rim, she was the one that tipped it in there to get us to the next round. So, and obviously my wife Roberta, we have 2 young sons, 3 and 1 that are keeping us busy during the time at home.
And over to you, Sheldon.
Well, just like Nick, I talk about both. It's interesting this week. I mean, there's so much rewind, sporting events that are going on here. But one that I had a chance to catch this week was the 2000 Barrie Colts. When I was a player, first time I see myself play, in our championship run there, first time I've seen myself play since I stopped playing, but also a chance my parents watched, and we got to talk about it. And you certainly think about just how much your parents gave and your mom gave to support your path as a player, which then of course you become an adult. Now as a parent myself and a husband, you know how much you rely on your spouse, and you're trying to support kids and keep things running. And for my wife Jackie, I mean, we give so much to our jobs, to our game, and we're on the road as much as we are. They take on so much to be able to let us do what we do and still keep the family running and keep the kids moving. And definitely grateful, particularly at a time like this where we've got to spend so much time at home and see really what happens while we're gone, and how much work and how much energy it is. So definitely grateful and looking forward to celebrating on Sunday.
Yeah, you have a lot of big days, but June 28, 2008, you and Jackie was obviously the one. So congratulate. You were captain, of the Barrie team. You're an amazing right winger, Nick. He was he would take the puck on the right side and 5 guys would melt. He had this ability to draw their defense. He was just really deceptive. You, 3 points at Northern Iowa. You hold a shooting percentage record for 3-point baskets. Where'd that come from? How often did you, as a kid, work on 3-point shooting?
I only took ones when I was really wide open. That's how come I made a lot. But I was not extremely athletic. I did play a lot of sports, but I was to keep up with the speed and quickness. I knew I had to learn how to shoot, and figured that out pretty quickly. And just like every kid out there, man, I was in the driveway shoveling snow and shooting baskets and doing it all day long, trying to get better.
Well, I'm sure this was a great insight for everyone, and sure a treat for all coaches. Nick and Sheldon, thank you. Special thank you to Nick Nurse and Sheldon Keefe, the Leafs and the Raptors. Again, we are back Monday with another edition of In Conversation at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 Pacific. I mentioned Thelonious Monk, the great jazz artist, as one of Nick Nurse's musical heroes. Here's another, maybe his favorite pop rocker, Prince. And our lyric is Dearly Beloved. We are gathered here today to get through this thing called life, from Let's Go Crazy. That's the week. Thanks for watching. So long for now.